So hello, everyone. And here we are in the afternoon of our first day of the Mount Shasta Chela gathering. Thank you all for coming. And this is Peter Mount Shasta, and he's our next speaker. And he's written lots of books. Actually read one from one of his books this morning that it's called I Am the Open Door, and these masters appeared to him in their light bodies, and they said, write down what we say, and that's what he did. Is that right?
That's pretty, yeah, that's it. That's what happened. For a long time.
1977, and we've been very grateful that you're coming here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Donna.
Yeah.
Thank you for sponsoring this event. And we've got quite an audience here and globally as well. You mentioned when the masters came to me to give me that book, I Am the Open Door, people get the impression I'm living a life of ease where I sit around and the masters materialize and we sit and chat. It's not like that. In fact, that book came about as part of a healing for me. I had just broken up with a woman who was my twin ray. Saint Germain brought her, it was over Christmas, to visit me, opened our hearts up. It was my mother's house, but we tremendous spiritual connection. Then he said, you're not to be together in this lifetime. So I said, thanks a bunch, and said, you have to take her, you have to tell her to leave and take her to the airport, which was a very traumatic experience. It took me, a year or two to recover from that. But I was standing there, it was in January 1977. I was leaning against the window, my head against the window pane with a broken heart, and Kutumi appeared to me. And I didn't see him, but I heard his voice, and he said, we have put you through everything we could think of. And I thought, oh, thanks. Is that what you guys do, is sit around thinking, what can we put our disciples through? You know what I mean? But that is how we grow, So he knew I had some gaps in my character that needed working on, and he put me through that. And it seems like they thought of some new things since then. But anyway, as everyone tells me, you're all students of the masters, and I know you've all been through heartbreaking, difficult experiences. So please don't lose faith. That's a part of the Chela's path, is to go through these experiences. They don't just give you a Maltese cross and say, now you remember the Great White Brotherhood, it's smooth sailing from now on, there's no problems or whatever. So as my teacher Pearl used to say, you have to walk the razor's edge. And sometimes you get nicked a bit doing that. So, I'm not much on giving speeches, but I will see what comes forth. And if you have questions, you can ask. So I'd like to start with a joke sort of that I think explains some of the I am a bit. Anyway, someone told me this about 6 months ago, and it kind of struck me. I used to be, this actually pertains to me, I used to be an atheist, and then I discovered that I am God. So you're looking for God out there and all around, and then you go through a lot of ordeals, and then eventually, if you're paying attention, you find it's in here all along, which is why Saint Germain gives that light meditation in the first chapter of Unveiled Mysteries. He said, imagine there is a sun in the center of your chest and expand it out. And it doesn't matter if you don't see a light. Like there was a woman in South Korea that she said, I've been doing that meditation for a year now and I haven't seen any lights, And I said, well, it's not like turning on a light switch, it's subtle. It's more of a feeling, like when you feel love for somebody, you feel something here. So you meditate, it's more of a feeling you meditate on, but the visualization helps also. Some people are more visual, that there's a sun there and you expand that out. And yeah, it's, then of course, then you say, I am that light. And as you say that, it goes out into the room. And yeah, when I first met Pearl, she said, she led me inward like that. And she said, say, I am the living light. And when I said that, I saw light in the room with my eyes open. And I went, oh, I thought that's the light that people talk about. They say, have you seen the light? I thought it was a metaphor, like, have you seen the truth or something? But I actually saw a light and I was just ecstatic. And so then Pearl said, you can create with that light. Whatever you say after I am is what you create. I am the living light going forth into the world. I am the living light going from my heart to your heart. See, and that brings us down into the mother aspect, which they don't talk about. Most of the teachings given are very patriarchal, globally, even for the last many thousands of years, where you're supposed to work on becoming enlightened, and you go into the emptiness or the void where there are no thoughts, you know. But then, you know, the mother aspect says, well, you know, could use a little beauty around here. You know, the emptiness is nice, but you know, also have some flowers or some, you know, something like that. So the mother wants to create, and that's created with love. You know, so then you visualize the light, and then wow, you can have colored light too. You can have pink light, violet light, green light, and that light can take a form of a flower. Wow, that's beautiful, you know. So, you know, it's the two together, the mind and the heart is how creation comes into being. And but anyway, I remember before I was born, I was sort of like a mind. I think I just had the three higher centers. I was above the earth somewhere, and there were a lot of other souls, and we were just having a great time. If you would think of someone, you didn't need to send them a text. You know, you just think of them and their face would appear, you know, and you could communicate like that. And one day, these two masters showed up, which I think in retrospect were El Morya and Kutumi. And they said, it's time for you to go back down. And I went, down where? And they said, down there. They pointed down. I saw the earth down there. And I said, oh no, I'm not going back down there. And they said, you agreed. And I should have said, show me the contract, but you know, I didn't have much choice. They put a hand on each shoulder and they started pushing me toward the earth. And then they said, forget who you are. And I said, no way. And they said, you will forget. And they kept pushing me closer to the earth. And gradually I felt my consciousness disappearing. And the next thing I know, I was in this baby body that was cold and hungry and feeling lonely, and I was screaming. And so that, you know, the memory of who I was gone, you know. And but then later on, as I grew up, I would have moments of memory where I would go back into that basic God consciousness, and I would lose all track of my surroundings. And that was very embarrassing when it happened in school. I'd be standing on the playground or something, and then I would open my eyes and there'd be people standing around, and they'd say, Peter, where were you? And I said, well, I was right here. No, they said, for the last 5 minutes, you've had a blank look on your face and been staring into space. And I would just kind of spontaneously have those memories of who I was, but I still didn't really believe in God, you know. So at some point after I started doing Hatha yoga, I started trying to, you know, incorporate the body, and I could feel spirit moving in my body from doing Hatha yoga. And that led me to India. Neem Karoli Baba, who was Ram Dass's guru, sent me a message, come to India. And I met him and hung out with Ram Dass and that whole crowd, you know, Krishna Das. And he pretty much ignored me. And so I kind of went on my way and just met many amazing yogis in the Himalayas. Yogis that didn't eat. They would, once a week cook something for me, some rice and stuff like that. Sometimes maybe twice a week. But I think just being in their energy and being in the Himalayas, I didn't feel like I needed that much. But there were some really amazing beings that I met there. And I remember one day I went back into that God consciousness, and I said, I remember thinking, I don't ever want to lose this again. I want to hold on to this. How can I was asking, how can I stay in this consciousness? And Saint Germain appeared, but I didn't know who he was. He didn't introduce himself, but I remember what he looked like. So there was just suddenly this man there in a white robe, and he said, "Say I am." And when I did say that, I would go back into that, and that lasted maybe through the next day. Then it stopped working, But that stayed with me for quite a while. And then later, I was wandering around in southern India, and I met this lady, Saint Anandamayi Mai. And I had met her first at her ashram in Varanasi, but it was like on New Year's Eve, and there was a big crowd there, and she seemed very bored. In fact, I think she was yawning, and imagine thousands of people wanting to touch your feet. You just got to sit there and let these people do that, And so I made a prayer that I would, meet her or some other great saint alone on a country road and just get to talk to them face to face. And about a month later, I was in Jagannath Puri, which is one of the main sacred places in India. And I went to buy some rice, and the woman, it was just a little stall where they sell rice and beans and things like that. The woman in front of me turned around, and it was Anandamayi Mai. Sometimes these gurus like to escape from the ashram, just be a normal person. Well, she had an ashram there in Jagannath Puri, and she kind of escaped there. And she just gone out like a regular woman and bought groceries and was going to cook dinner for her disciples. And lo and behold, I ran into her. And I walked along. I asked if I could carry her groceries, and she said, "No, in India, that's not appropriate for a man to carry a woman's, a stranger. You're not supposed to really talk that much, But so we had a nice chat. And the funny thing is, she was speaking in Bengali and I was speaking in English, but we understood each other perfectly. I mean, that's kind of a miracle. But then the next day, I was coming back from the temple in a rickshaw, and she saw me before I saw her. And she bowed like this, and she's, like namaste, which in Sanskrit, that's the God in me honors the God in you. The thing is, she wasn't just saying it, she saw God in me, And the energy I almost fell out of the rickshaw. The energy was so profound because, there I was back in that consciousness, and that it just happened just from contact with her. So I went home, and the next 3 days I meditated pretty much as long as I could, day and night, just to say, I want to see in myself what she saw. And it wasn't until, but none of these great yogis taught me how to do that. In fact, some of these amazing beings, they could, precipitate food out of the air. They knew what you were thinking, but they were silent. They didn't speak, but, like there's one of them, he knew what I was wanting to eat, and he waved his hand, and there was the food that I wanted in his hand. But they still didn't teach me anything or how to, achieve that consciousness on a sustained basis. But it's when I met Pearl that she taught me how to do that. And I met Pearl in kind of an unusual way. In India, the last couple of weeks I was there, I had 3 people come up to me on the street, say, you should go to Mount Shasta. Because my visa was expiring and I missed the energy of the Himalayas, and they said, well, there is in the United States a place similar to the Himalayas where they're masters, and that's Mount Shasta. You should go there. So I came to Mount Shasta, and I was fasting on the mountain, and one morning I woke up, and there was that voice that had spoken to me in the Himalayas, which is Saint Germain, and he knew my name, knew all about me, and he told me what the next year of my life was going to bring. And I didn't like anything he said. He said I was going to go back to India and meet Sai Baba, and that, I was going to sell my farm near Woodstock, where I started a commune, and I had, pretty nice life. And he said I was going to move to Mount Shasta, and Mount Shasta was a logging town then with, if you walk down the street with long hair, I had long hair, then people would shout at me, dirty hippie, get a job and stuff. So I didn't want to move to Mount Shasta. He told me all these things, and I didn't like any of it. And the last thing he said was, change your name to Mount Shasta. And I said, you got to be kidding. I'm not going to do that. All my friends in India took Indian names. And I said, if I didn't take an Indian name, I'm not going to take a silly name like that. And he said, well, you will. And I said, no, I said, no, I won't. And he said, we shall see. So anyway, so eventually I was writing a book. I thought I'll use that as a pen name. And of course, a year later, I did go back to India, like he said, and but I didn't want to come back to Mount Shasta. So I was staying on someone's floor in Berkeley, and one morning, a ball of light came into the room. I had been thinking, actually, I wanted to leave my body, because these yogis in the Himalayas, when they felt their earthly work was finished, they'd just lie down and leave their body, consciously. And I thought, there's really nothing more I want to do. I don't want to be CEO of a company or go to wild parties or any of that stuff, which I had tried to explore when I was in college and found it not very enjoyable. And so I said, I've, found God within me, but I still didn't really totally believe in the ascended masters, because, Buddhism, it kind of gives you the impression that when you're fully enlightened, you're just merged with the Buddha mind, with the oneness, and that there's no self. That's what they say, there's no self. Of course, they pray to Buddha and Padmasambhava, but they kind of forget about that. Anyway, so I was sleeping on this Jayu Tal, that was it. He'd been with Neem Karoli Baba. He let me crash on his floor, very kind of him. And this ball of light came down into the room early one morning and said, go to Muir Woods, I'll meet you there. And so I went to Muir Woods, and I understand now you can't even drive there. You have to park someplace else and buy a ticket, and a bus will take you there. I should get a commission from the Forest Service there or something, all those people I sent there. But anyway, there was nobody else in the parking lot. It was raining. And who's going to go to Muir Woods at 8 o'clock in the morning on a rainy day, So I wandered around, and I was looking for a way to get out of the rain. So I found a redwood tree that was hollow, had been hollowed out by fire. And I got inside the trunk of the tree and sat there to meditate. And I did this Vipassana meditation, where you just feel the in-breath and the out-breath, and that slows the mind down. And I had my eyes open. I was just looking at the forest floor and observing my breath. And then I kind of, what came to me was, before I was going to try to leave my body, and I said, before I do this, maybe I should ask permission from somebody. And I said, just in case there really are ascended masters, or there's somebody up there, I'll call on them, and I should really make an effort to ask permission. So I called on Jesus and Mary and all the masters I heard of. I did call on Saint Germain. I called on the Ascended Masters and Buddha and Kuan Yin and went down the whole list. And suddenly there was a young guy standing in front of me. Now he did not walk up. I would have heard the twigs breaking or something. And he was wearing jeans. He just looked like an ordinary guy in his 20s. But he knew my name. He said, "Peter, your prayer has been heard. I am the part of the Godhead that has been sent to answer your prayer." And he said, "You have finished enough of your earthly karma so that you can leave your body if you want." And I said, "Great," and he said, "In fact, I will help you." And then he touched my third eye, and suddenly I was out of my physical body. And I looked back, and there was my physical body still sitting in the tree, meditating. And I was in another body that looked just like the physical body. And he put his arm around my shoulder, and next thing I know, we were above the earth. And there, beings existed as the I Am presence. I didn't see bodies, they were just balls of light, which I think is what in Theosophy they would call the night of God. There's a day of God when you're active, you come forth into duality. And then the night of, you kind of like in meditation for millions of years, where you're not aware of anything other than just bliss, light and bliss, So I saw these beings just emanating bliss, I mean, you could feel it. It was just beautiful. And I said, "This is it. This is where I want to be." And then I heard this crying coming from someplace, and it got louder and louder. And I looked down, and there was the earth. And I said, "What is that? That is awful." And he said, "That is the suffering of humanity. The masters hear that all the time. And if we could cry, we would, And it was just heartrending. I mean, the wailing and suffering and crying. And I said, "I can't leave. I've got to go back." And he smiled and he said, "You made the right choice, my boy." And he said, "I want you to help me with my work, but you need training first. And I want you to go back to Mount Shasta, and you will meet your teacher there. The first person you meet in Mount Shasta will tell you what to do next." And the next thing I know, I was back in my body inside the tree trunk. And he said, "Now I will show you who I am." And in front of me, he changed form from this guy wearing jeans into the form of Saint Germain in a white robe. And it's like the picture in the first edition of Unveiled Mysteries. That was a picture that he had precipitated and given to Godfre Ray King, I understand. And then he just faded out slowly and disappeared. And I recognized him because when I was a guest at the Theosophical Society, they had his picture there. And I had tried to read Unveiled Mysteries, but I hadn't been ready for it at the time. And so anyway, I felt like I've been hit by lightning. I got in my car. There was still no one in the parking lot. Maybe it was 9 o'clock now. I drove to Mount Shasta, and somehow I got here within about 2 hours, which is physically impossible, even if I'd been going 80 miles an hour, because it's about a 5 or 6 hour drive. Even Morel couldn't get here that fast.
I did try.
You did try? Okay. So anyway, because, I know it was morning because there was a place called the Breakfast House on Mount Shasta Boulevard, and everyone was in there. They were having breakfast, and it was kind of a small community then. Everyone knew each other. And there was a sign in the door that said, "No hippies allowed." And I didn't call myself a hippie, but I did have long hair, no backpacks, no long hair. And I went in, you could have heard a pin drop. People stopped and said, "Boy, you got a lot of courage coming in here," because it was a logging town then. But the waitress seated me at the counter and brought me breakfast. And just before I finished, a young guy came up to me who owned a health food store. And he said, "You were supposed to meet a lady by the name of Pearl." And he said, "Come over to the store when you're finished and use my phone." So I went over and called Pearl on the phone. She said, "Come right up." So she was right in town. I went up to her house. just a tiny little house on a back street. And she said, I've been expecting you. And I said, how could you be expecting me? We've never met before. And she said, the Master Saint Germain came to me this morning and said that he was sending you. And I said, well, he's the one that, I saw. She said, what brought you here? And I told her my story. And then she said, Saint Germain is helping you. He's talking to you. And I said, I don't hear a thing. She said, he's talking to your higher self. And when the time is right, you will know what to do. But this way your mind would interfere. If you heard the words, your mind would interfere. And I said, well, would you channel to me what he's saying? And she said, the masters don't allow me to channel. That would weaken you. You have to learn to get the guidance inside, which you'll get by tuning into your own heart center. You'll learn to feel the guidance and get it that way, because through the outer senses, you can be deluded in so many ways. There's like tarot cards and casting rune stones and interpreting the flight of birds, all these kind of things, but they can be misinterpreted. She said the highest form of guidance is to just spontaneously do the right thing. And you get that by being in tune with your I am presence. You just get this feeling to do something and everything works out, And so that was in 73 there. And after that, she said, would you like to meditate? And when I always meditated, I would sit on the floor in lotus position, with my legs curled up and with my hands like this and my tongue against the roof of my mouth. And it was very serious, And she said, you don't need to sit on the floor to meditate. And I said, really? And she said, you don't even need to close your eyes. And I went, wow, this is something. So she was just sitting there. She said, keep your eyes open, but turn your attention inward and look at the center here. She'd say, now, if I say, who are you? You don't point who me or who me, you point who me, because you feel yourself, your soul is anchored there. And that's because the I am presence, or the God flame, the Atman, whatever you want to call it, is anchored there in a threefold flame. And you spontaneously know that, and that's what you should meditate on. So she said, put your attention on that presence there, that feeling, and see it as a sun. Imagine it's a sun. And then, I just saw our eyes met. And I felt the sun in her heart and the sun in my heart, that we were sending this beautiful light to each other. And that's when she said, say, I am the Son of God. But S-U-N, I am a son of God, not the son, a son of God. And that's when that light came in the room. And there was so much light that was emanating from her that she almost disappeared. I could just see the eyes and the face, and then there was just a ball of light in her chair. And I used to go up in the mornings and see her. Before I started my day, I'd go up at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we would sit like that, sometimes just 10 or 15 minutes, other times 45 minutes. And she would see me turn into light. I would see her turn into light. So they're like two light beings looking at each other, and there were no words, no messages, nothing verbal like that. It was just, getting charged up and, bringing the I am presence down into the physical form, which is great for your health too, And as Saint Germain says, bring that light down into every cell of your body, even down into your feet. And what the ascension is, actually, when you complete that, you can bring that light into every cell, and then your body is no longer physical. You become a being of light and merge completely with the I am presence, And there are beings that have actually done that physically. I studied with a Chinese master for a while, and he was there when his master ascended physically. That he was there. He told him, walk away 100 paces, sit down, do this mantra, something will happen, then turn around, say this other mantra, come back. And he said, while he was sitting there, there were 7 waves of different colored light that filled the entire sky. And he heard a sound. He called it an implosion. And when he got up, this is out on the side of the mountain. When he came back, the master was gone. There was just his hair and fingernails on the ground and his robe, kind of like Obi-Wan Kenobi or something like that. So there are, it's not a myth, and there are Tibetan lamas that have seen that. There's stories of people having witnessed that in Tibet. And actually recently there was a lama who was in Oregon and passed on, a lama that stayed at my house one day many years ago, and he died consciously, and after his death his body started to shrink, and that's, some of them don't actually complete dissolving the physical body, but the physical body, a 6-foot tall person might shrink down to 2 or 3 feet, So anyway, because they're gradually, during that process, when they know they're preparing to leave, they're dematerializing the physical structure, It's not that we have to do that, but there are many people ascend after they leave the physical body, which is what Godfre did, So I don't know, maybe someone has a question. Maybe someone has an answer. So I'd like personally to give gratitude to Saint Germain and to Pearl and all the beings that have helped me on the way.
Did you do anything to prepare to try and hear Saint Germain after Pearl said practice? Was it just the light in the heart?
Yeah, I asked Saint Germain to talk to me and for messages and all that, and he rarely, would just answer a question. But I mean, sometimes it would be like he'd say, "You're on the right track," or if I got the answer on my own, he'd say, "Well done," or But it was very rare that I would have like a conversation or. See, again, that thing is, if the masters are there for you, you can ask them all these questions. Then again, you start giving your energy to outer forces, outer personalities, and things like that. And it's really learning to tune into the presence and getting the answers in a very physical way, almost, or just a realization or something like that. And sometimes you might have a dream or something like that. And there was, during that first year or two in Mount Shasta, hardly a day passed when I did not see him, maybe just as a flash, just saying I'm here. But, and he told me to get into real estate, the real estate profession, buy old houses and fix them up, because I was completely ungrounded. And if you want to be a master, you have to know how other people live. How are you going to help them if you don't understand how they live? So that was part of how my lesson on the path of mastery was to get into the business world and, learn to deal with tenants and building contractors and lawyers and accountants and all that stuff. And that brought me more and more into the day-to-day world. He did not enter into, telling me the specifics on a daily basis, do this or do that, or he didn't say, don't rent to that tenant, or, change the washers on the washing machine. He did. It was all, every moment you have to, I am the present showing me what to do, and I am being guided and being directed. And then I would go, and then maybe the guy at the hardware store would tell me, or that it was every step of the way trying to intuit it and feel it and bring it through. That if he'd been there so he'd answer all of my questions like that, like where do they get the guidance, So if you want to be like Saint Germain, he gets it from the source, so that's what we have to do, really. Yeah.
So how do you tell the difference in the messages from your higher self to Saint Germain's?
Yeah, like it's one. It's pretty much it. If it's really from your I am presence. Now the question is, the mind is in there too, the human mind, and you hear something and you think, I think that was my presence talking to me, but actually it was the mind, motivated by the ego. So that's where you have to say, call on the presence to take any false guidance out of me. So, show me what the right thing is. And sometimes what I find, if I start to move in a certain direction that I think was the guidance, but then it starts to feel bad, it doesn't feel so good, then I stop and say, maybe I wasn't supposed to, if I'm really supposed to do that, like I say, they did some construction out here and they put the street signs up 90 degrees so the streets are mislabeled. So I've gone by there 3 times now, and I would make the inner call. I am the presence correcting that, having that corrected. Well, this time on my way over here, I'm going to do it myself. I got out and I tried to move the sign around, and it was so heavy I couldn't possibly do it. So see, I was in doubt. Is this my mind or is this the guidance? And what I heard was, go ahead, give it a try. If you think it's guidance, go ahead, give it a try. And I saw I couldn't possibly lift it. So I said, well, it was just my mind. I'll make the inner call that the Department of Public Works, whoever it was, that they fix it, So anyway, and so I test things all the time, and like I'll just hear, like this morning, just a feeling, go into town. It's almost like someone grabbed me, just pulled me, and I said, well, but I've got to talk at Donna's this afternoon. I don't want to go into town. But I went there and I met someone at the store I haven't talked to in a couple of years. We had a very profound conversation. And it was not, I didn't go in to get the mail or whatever it was to meet that guy, So again, if a voice had told me exactly why I was going, I might have, been under a lot of pressure or stress, something like that.
Right.
It says somewhere in one of the green books, the first step to perfection is naturalness. Just like to be in the flow. So you had a question.
Yeah, some people, they relate to divinity through a mentor, teacher, guide, that kind of very highly evolved incarnation or personality. So how then do you make this, how do you get from relating to divinity in form to the formless, which is the presence?
Well, in Tibetan Buddhism, there's an expression that God, Guru, and Self are one. So there is a time when, like, you may have a guru, or guru just means teacher, where you have a teacher and you feel that they're infallible. And even if they are infallible, if they're a true guru, they don't want you to be attached to them.
Yes.
They will eventually send you away, or God will cause some kind of separation. Now that happened with me and Pearl. There was kind of a mix-up that happened that for a year caused a falling out, kind of separation. That was eventually repaired, but there was a year there that was showing me I need to stop relating to her as the guru and she was actually kind of leaning on me as, her chela, her, right-hand person. And that needed to stop. And also there were a whole lot of other people in the group, and it was assigned to them that they should not be so attached to her. And actually, it was a blessing for Pearl because she was being moved toward her own ascension. And while she was living in Mount Shasta, people would show up at her door 8 o'clock in the morning, be there till 10 at night. Sometimes she wouldn't, days, sometimes she wouldn't be able to eat during the day because so many people were coming and going. She was like the kind of resident guru of Mount Shasta, And it's not that she really she didn't tell people what to do, but people would come pour out their problems to her. And then she would say, so, and what do you feel you're supposed to do? And then people would get it inside, She would make the inner call. I am the present showing this person what to do. So then after maybe half an hour of them pouring their heart out, and then she said, how do you feel about this? What do you feel you're supposed to? And they would get it themselves, and they would leave, and they'd say, I went to see Pearl, and she told me what to do. But I was sitting there. I know she didn't tell them what to do. But that's a true teacher, actually. So, a real guru who is authentic does not want students or need students, They don't care about being famous or rich or whatever it is.
Right.
They know that they're in your life as a catalyst for a certain period of time. And that then if they do their job, they're going to move you on, to find the inner guru, the inner presence, And so I don't know, I hope that answers a little bit. But,
Thank you.
yeah, it's very tricky though. And everybody prays to have, infallible teacher that they can go to. And it was kind of strange when I was with Neem Karoli Baba and Ram Dass and that whole crowd. He really was not telling people what to do either, rarely. He'd just say, love people and feed them. And you could ask him what to do and he'd just smile, or he'd say, well, what do you want to do? And he'd say, if you said this, and he'd say, Jiao, that means get lost. Go ahead, or, go ahead, do it, something like whatever. But he really made you trying to find out yourself what it was,
Right.
Just repeat the name Guru is G-U-R-U.
That's it, G-U-R-U, that's true, exactly. Yeah. It's very interesting in Sanskrit, the words I am in Sanskrit, it's aham. You say aham is I am. Aham Brahmasmi is I am God, or I am Brahma,
So I've got a question.
Sure.
I've read that the I am in different languages, you have to use your own language for it. So for French, you say je suis, and in German, ich bin. They don't have all the vowels that I am has and ahum has. So they don't sound as powerful as our English language and the Sanskrit.
Right. Like even if you say aham in Sanskrit, it doesn't have the power for me that's saying I am. Like when Saint Germain told me, he didn't say aham, he said say I am, because that's my language, but other people he's told to say it in the language that means something to them.
I just felt there was a certain vibration about ahum and I am, which the je suis and ich bin don't have, but that might be my misperception.
Everybody has to really find out what works. Sanskrit is what I call a primordial language. That babies around the world, doesn't matter what the mother tongue is, they all will say mama and dada. Like my own daughter, she was, I don't know, 6 months old or something. One day she said, Dada. I didn't coach her. Nobody
Wow.
said, say Dada. And then she, a few weeks later said, Mama. And there are the Sanskrit alphabet, these are things that babies say around the world, like you say, ow, that's Sanskrit. Around the world, you hurt yourself, you go, ow, that's Sanskrit. And or if something feels good, you go, ah. Around the world, people say, ah, that's Sanskrit. See, so those are primordial sounds that come from the Godhead, So it's fascinating. And that's why Sanskrit mantras are so powerful, because they go right into the nervous system, But if you're working on mastery, you have to know what you're saying and what you're doing, and so it's more effective, to say it in your own tongue. I am the living light. I am the healing presence of God in action, something like that. But anyway.
So, Peter, I have a sub question. So, you had used such a great job of explaining kind of Eastern thought and bringing it into the I am idea, right? I get the sense that you've had a lot of experience in the East and many embodiments in the East, and you have that energy,
right?
Was there any? Was it a challenge to, once you got into this I am teaching? Was it a challenge to kind of look at the Eastern thought?
Well, not really, because what I saw was the I am teachings have been in India for tens of thousands of years.
Yeah. Yes.
In a slightly different form, but Saint Germain, from his grace, he gave it to us in English, in a simplified form, without all the, thousands of gods and myths and superstition and all those kind of things, in a very pure, simple way. But I saw at some point that, these Sanskrit mantras are I am affirmations, and the great saints up in the mountains, the yogis, were meditating on the I am, and they did ascend, they did become masters. So it's just, it can get so complicated in India with all the different paths, but it all is, weaving in and out of the same eternal, the basic truth is simple, which is that we're all rays of light from the great central sun, and we took on limitation to learn something. God wanted to experience something. So it's like have a movie here, and we'll forget who we are. And as we remember, it's going to be a great experience. And we'll learn something. The movie's not exciting if it doesn't have some challenges and some bad guys and things like that, But even the bad guys are actually rays of light too, so we have to try to see that. So that's what helps me, as I remember that this is all taking place in the mind of God. This is all a vast sea of consciousness, and to try to observe it, and of course observing yourself, to think, oh, that was a judgmental thought, or that was anger, or is there a more compassionate way to do that, or something like that. So that process is really ongoing, so I call it just self-observation, observing the self. And it doesn't matter what country you're in, East or West, there's plenty of work to do in that area, so that's where meditation comes in, which, although Godfre Ray King gave that meditation, it was Pearl's great sorrow that more people didn't do it. I mean, after Godfrey's ascension, after she dropped out of the activity, when she was in Mount Shasta, she said of all those thousands of people, they figured probably 3 million people had had contact with Godfrey or heard him, you know, while he was alive, that there was such a small handful of people that really understood that you had to go within, that it wasn't all just from the ego, you know, I am this, I am that these were not just words, and it was not human will that you were trying to call forth, that by going within, you would call forth the divine will. In fact, that was a very interesting experience. After about a year in Mount Shasta, I saw that by using the I am with my own willpower, I could create all kinds of stuff, you know, and I experimented with that. Like I wanted a house out in the country, you know, by a stream, and somebody just gave it to me with no rent, you know. But then after a while, I saw, you know, it was like 45-minute drive. I belonged in Mount Shasta, so I'd be closer to Pearl. And it was just one thing after another. I wanted a car, I decreed for a car, someone gave me a car. But then I realized that wasn't the right car, that I needed different. Anyway, so finally one day I sat down and I said, thy will, not my will, be done. I call on the I am presence. You show me what you want, that you know the plan. And then it became more of surrender rather than just willpower, you know, because your own human will doesn't hold a candle to the will of the I am presence. The I am presence has access to infinite power. So when you're doing the will of God, the doors will open, you know, and you'll have what you need, you know. So it's more, I found, rather than saying, I am getting this done, you know, it's I am, you know, it's more like accepting it. I accept what you want. I am the presence of God in action doing this. And then it just goes through and it does what it's supposed to do. But anyway, it's just my way. Yeah.
So, what I haven't really grasped is these decrees, they seem so demanding and commanding. And when I hear you speak just like you did just now, where, you know, your will, the human will or personal will folds more into the divine will, that sounds more like the path of surrender. And so how do I bring that together then?
Well, again, it's like the father-mother principle that you kind of bring them together. So there's the consciousness, you know, I am the presence of God bringing forth, and then you have the visualization and the feeling and the love that you release. So when you're decreeing, you know, at the top of your lungs, that's more like, I think, of the father principle, you know, and then the love part more, I think, the mother, the nurturing quality, you know, but whatever it is, it should come from your heart. And if it's coming from emotion, you know when it's coming from emotion, you know, and that's the ego,
right?
You know, it's not that you can't say the affirmation loud, you know, but if it's coming, you know, with anger or impatience or ego or, you know, from the solar plexus, then, you know, that's from the human, you know.
But still, there's some language in those decrees that does sound commanding. For example, in the Tube of Light, you'll say, I think it's about the third sentence, see to it that I am invincibly protected against blah, blah, blah. And that does sound like a command.
Yeah, well, I don't say that myself. I would say I am invincibly protected, you know.
That's in one of the white books, the fundamentals, that language from the sanctuaries.
So I can't speak for all the other paths that have taken these teachings, and there's much disagreement among them about how it should be and everything. But my personal experience is those doing the decrees with emotion, and you're talking to God. You don't shout at God, or see to it that like, who are you talking to? If you're really in touch with God, God hears your every thought. You cannot take a breath without God. It's God that's beating your heart. So you don't need to shout to God. So, and when you say I am, God is coming forth through you. So, you don't need to give detailed instructions to God. It's just like,
So you're saying it,
I am invincibly.
but you're not demanding.
Yeah.
You don't have.
I even say, please see to it that I'm invincibly protected sometimes. But that's, again, the human thing,
Right.
I am invincibly protected, or just protect me, or,
I think it also relates to what brings you the greatest feeling. So if
Yeah.
you say I am
Yeah.
protected, and if you feel it enough, but sometimes you might say mighty young presence, see
Yeah.
to it that I am.
Yeah.
It might bring a greater feeling.
Yeah.
So I think it's very
Yeah.
much an individual thing.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say, mighty Anthea, see to it that I am invincibly protected. Well, it's not up to me to order you. I'd say, Anthea, please see to it that I'm invincibly protected. And I know that you're a cosmic being of divine love, and that you want to help me, and that you would do that. My demanding and commanding of you is, might even push you away. So I don't know.
Thank you, that was very helpful.
Yeah, like, when you have children, I mean, if you're going to do, the child asks you for something, if they say, please, mommy, or please, daddy, would you do this? You're more than wanting to, do what they want. But if I demand you to help me, forget it, do it yourself, So this has been fun gathering. I say everybody should, experiment with it on their own. But to know that God is present at every moment, that is really something. And when you say I am, you call that presence into action. So, and then, you can, dear God, please show me what the obstacles are. What do I need to clear? And that's then where the meditation comes in. I still do that Vipassana meditation, observing the in-breath and the out-breath. It just stills the mind. And then you can see what comes up. Oh, gee, I didn't really handle that very well this morning, that conversation. I could have said it differently. Okay, I'll work on that. So I think is until we ascend, we're always looking at different ways we could do things, or try to understand where the negativity came in. Is that some vestigial anger I have at my father or mother from something? And to say, I should really clear that, because it keeps coming up. And why should I take that out on my friend or my wife or whatever, So that's why it's very important not to just say, I am the master presence in action. I am infallible. I am going forward, because wait a minute, slow down. There are some things in there, some human qualities that we need to look at, and not just pretend that you can say I am holy, pure, and perfect. But if you go around town saying I am holy, pure, and perfect, people are going to think, wow, what an egomaniac. If you start to believe that, if the ego believes that you're holy, pure, and perfect, you're really in deep trouble. You're going to come around for another lifetime, And so you look at the things that are not holy, pure, and perfect, So what a great adventure we got here.
Peter,
Yeah, sure.
I've got another question. You said just 5 minutes ago that even the bad guys are rays of light. Now, it's our understanding, certainly my understanding, my perception today, that there really are dark forces around trying to upset things and are very negative. Are they also rays of light?
Well, that's really good question. And you know, I don't have a total answer on that, but there are obviously light beings who have done very bad things, and they have come around, maybe thousands of lifetimes back, to get back into the light again. But, there are shadows also, but still, where did everything came forth originally from the mind of God, they're poisonous spiders and snakes and so on, and God created them too, like even poison ivy. You think, why did God create poison ivy? Well, in homeopathy, the remedy made from poison ivy is one of the greatest remedies for skin conditions. What will cause a condition will also cure it. So that applies to human relationships too. If you have, like, say, a little vestigial anger in there, then you run into someone who's very angry, that maybe get you in touch with your own anger. So it's this thing, like cures like, So even the poison ivy was created by God and there's a plan for it. Of course, if you run into it in the forest, you're going to think, why did God create that? It made me itch, but there was a purpose behind it. So, in the beginning, there was just consciousness, then there was light, it's all in Genesis, kind of in a very poetic form. And
so we just have to trust that the dark forces are actually for our own evolution. And we don't have to do anything. Just have to sit and say it's all right.
Yes.
Well, I don't do that.
Well, wait a minute. I mean, there's ways to deal with those forces. You read in my book, a being attacked me at night and even stabbed me. It was very real. And I called on all the masters, and say, I don't think I said blast and annihilate, but I take command or whatever, and nobody showed up. So I'm face to face with this demonic being who was very real. It was not a dream. I was wide awake. And I sent forth love. And it stepped back and went, wow, what was that? And over the coming weeks, I prayed and prayed for that being. And he finally said, thank you. You helped me with my evolution. And that being has turned around like that. And there was a woman told me, I think a week ago, that she was staying in a motel room somewhere and she was going to bed at night and some kind of lizard creature started to climb in bed with her. It was like a man, but it had lizard skin, reptilian skin. And she put her hand up and said, get out. And it did, it left. So, so she, it respected her divine power, and sometimes, like, I got sent into downtown San Francisco, where there were all kinds of dark forces, and I was calling on Archangel Michael and, doing very dynamic work, Saint Germain, Violet Tar, Angels of the Violet Flame, really, really calling on all entities to be removed. I mean, I do this kind of work every day. Like when I'm not talking with people, I'm doing inner work. And I call for those dark forces to be removed around the world, wherever they might be active, So they are very real. And it's not, you don't want to just say, oh, God's will be done or whatever. It's up to us to assert, so yeah, so that's good. Yeah, in fact, I actually have an actual sword that used to belong to my daughter, but she didn't want it anymore. So I every now and then will take that sword. I call on Archangel Michael to empower this as a sword of blue flame, go forth and clear the earth of whatever it needs to be cleared of, and let that go, So it's like called dynamic application,
Very good.
Yeah. But there's no personal anger in there.
I was gonna say, you say it with love, not.
There you go.
Make it into the light.
It's a creation.
Yeah.
How's our time? Peter?
It's after seven after
After what?
3.
Oh, well, you better say.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.